The boardroom table was slick with blood, and Coralie Dufresne's hands had not stopped moving for 11 minutes straight. That was how she measured emergencies. Not in seconds, but in the rhythm of her own hands. Keep moving, keep pressure, don't think about where you are. She had pressed her palm flat against the shoulder wound of a man she didn't know, using a strip torn from the hem of her own blouse as a pressure dressing, while the sounds of gunfire faded somewhere in the floors below. A hand clamped around her wrist, not rough exactly, more like a clamp, deliberate. You should be hiding. The voice was low, quiet in the specific way that made a room go still around it. Coralie looked up. One eye, pale slate blue, watched her with something that wasn't quite surprise. The other was covered by a strip of matte black, not theatrical, not a prop. Just a patch, fitted close, unremarkable in the way that permanent things become. Leandro Ferrante, head of the Ferrante Syndicate, the man the Toronto underworld called the blind strategist, though nobody said it where he could hear it. "I'm keeping your man alive," she said, "not stopping the pressure. I can hide later." Something shifted in that one visible eye, then his grip loosened. That moment, his fingers on her wrist, the blood on her hands, the silence after the gunfire. That was where she understood that whatever this was had already been going on for 3 weeks. She'd just been too busy surviving it to notice. 3 weeks earlier, the letter arrived at the restaurant. Her father, René Dufresne, owned a 30-year-old bistro on Queen Street West. Chalkboard menus, mismatched chairs, the kind of place that had somehow outlasted 4 rounds of neighborhood gentrification through sheer stubbornness. Coralie had grown up in that kitchen. She'd studied for nursing school exams in the back booth. She had assumed, in the uncomplicated way that daughters assume things about their fathers, that the restaurant was as exactly what it appeared to be. It wasn't. René had not laundered money intentionally. That was what he told her, and she believed him, because lying had never been something her father was competent at. 15 years ago, when the bistro was failing, he had taken on a silent investor. The investor had asked for a small favor, occasional cash handled through the restaurant's accounts. René had told himself it was tax avoidance, garden variety financial grayness, the kind of thing you stopped thinking about. The investor was a front for the Ferrante organization, and 15 years of small favors had accumulated into something the organization considered a liability. $3 million in tracked exposure. René had nothing left but a mortgaged deed and a daughter who worked 12-hour shifts in an emergency department and sent money home at the end of every month. The men who came on a Thursday afternoon were polite. That was what Coralie kept returning to in the days after, how completely ordinary they seemed. Sport coats. One of them ordered a coffee. The envelope they left on the table was sealed, addressed to her by name. Inside, a single typewritten page. She was invited to serve as private medical attendant at the Ferrante compound. Her credentials: registered nurse, 3 years in emergency medicine. Her father's debt would be frozen, interest suspended, no date of conclusion was specified. The language was pleasant enough that the threat inside it required a second read to locate. She found it on the third. Coralie was not a woman who cried easily. Emergency nursing selected against it over time, the same way certain temperatures selected for certain organisms. You adapted or you left. She had adapted. She sat in the back booth for a long time after her father retreated to the kitchen, looked at the typewritten page, and thought about how much of her life had been shaped by other people's choices. Then she folded the letter, smoothed the crease with her thumb, and began with the methodical calm that made her good at her job to pack. The Ferrante compound north of the city was not what she'd prepared herself for. She had braced for the particular flavor of wealth that needed everyone to know about itself. Marble and excess, the grammar of intimidation. What she found instead was restraint, a heritage property stone facade, a long gravel driveway that absorbed sound. The interior was ordered and severe. The furniture was expensive in a way that didn't ask for attention. She was met by a man named Nico Serrano, compact 50s, with the careful politeness of someone who had spent decades managing situations that could turn dangerous. He showed her the medical room, which was properly stocked, she noted with reluctant surprise, and the suite she would occupy, adjacent to the primary residence, separated by a short corridor with a single door. "Mr. Ferrante will see you at 6, Nico said and left. Coralie spent the intervening hours learning the room. She inventoried the supplies twice. She made notes on what was missing. She did not let herself think about the locked gate at the end of the driveway. At exactly 6, Nico showed her to a room lined with working maps, topographic surveys, maritime charts, port infrastructure she didn't have context for. Leandro Ferrante sat behind a wide oak desk reading from a folder. He did not look up when she entered. The first thing she registered was the posture, that particular quality of someone accustomed to people waiting. The second was the eye patch, which she had been briefed on by Nico. A device detonation 18 months ago, close range, destroyed the orbital structure of his left eye. He had not replaced it with a prosthetic. The third thing she registered was that he was tracking her, noticing all of this, the one eye moving over her face with an attention that felt uncomfortably complete. "Sit down, Miss Dufresne." She sat. "You reviewed the medical inventory." Not a question. She answered it anyway. "You're short 2 categories of hemostatic agents. Your epinephrine stock is past quarter fill, and whoever ordered the suture kit bought the wrong gauge for anything above a superficial repair." A pause. "Nico will take you to the supplier tomorrow." "I'd like to go myself." The eye held her. "Why?" "Because I'll know what to order." A longer pause. "Then Nico will accompany you." She had expected a negotiation. The brisk finality surprised her. He was already reading again. "What exactly is my role here, Mr. Ferrante?" He turned a page. "Medical attendant. Present at the compound. Accompanying me to necessary external engagements. Attending to any needs that arise. A beat. There are events at which a medical professional's presence is plausible. It is also useful for certain audiences to perceive a degree of personal connection. I don't require you to perform. I require presence and the composure you already appear to possess." "My father's debt." Frozen as agreed. "What concludes the arrangement?" Something moved in his expression, not warmth, more like recognition. "That remains to be negotiated." He returned to his folder. "You'll have reasonable freedom within the property. You won't leave without Nico, not because I distrust you, because the alternative creates a security exposure I won't manage." She almost said, "You mean I'm a hostage?" But looking at him, the flatness of it, the complete absence of performance, she understood that naming it that would be technically accurate and entirely beside the point. He wasn't running a fiction for her comfort. He was simply describing how it was. She found unexpectedly that she preferred that. The weeks settled into a pattern she hadn't anticipated. Ferrante's days were long and opaque, meetings she wasn't part of, calls she didn't hear, men who arrived and departed with the regularity of a shift schedule. She saw him at dinner, which they ate in a room with tall windows overlooking the property's back garden. He didn't make conversation, neither did she after the second night. Nico mentioned quietly that the boss ate alone, always had. She watched Ferrante when she could do it without being obvious. The slight tilt of his head compensating for the absent eye, the way he mapped exits before sitting anywhere. The particular stillness he maintained on his left side. Not vulnerability exactly, more like a zone he had learned to manage without looking like he was managing it. There were also the headaches. He didn't mention them. She noticed the tension in his jaw at certain hours, the way he'd press 2 fingers briefly to his temple and stop immediately if anyone was nearby. She said nothing for 11 days. On the 12th, she left a small bottle of magnesium glycinate on his desk without comment. The next morning, the bottle had moved to his right side drawer. That was all. She didn't know what to make of Leandro Ferrante. He was cold and precise and managed the complex machinery of whatever he oversaw. She had deliberately chosen not to learn the specifics, with a focused intelligence that was strange to observe from close range. The underworld called him the blind strategist. She thought that was wrong. His one eye saw more than most people managed with two. What she hadn't expected was to care about that. The trouble came in the shape of a man named Rafe Hennessy. Ferrante's second-in-command was everything his boss wasn't. Loud in the specific way of people who needed the room to register them, generous with smiles that preceded nothing good, and possessed of the particular brand of impatience that dressed itself up as urgency. Coralie was restocking the medical room when she heard Hennessy's voice through the partially open corridor door. "The Nakamura deal, Leandro. We needed that dock access 3 weeks ago. Let me take 4 of our people down there and close it myself." "The Nakamura group doesn't respond to crews." Ferrante's voice flat and exact. "They respond to relationships. You go in with 4 men, you signal desperation. We wait, we offer the Vancouver route as the alternative. They'll come to us. While we wait, Chen's people are taking the gap. Let them, Chen overextends, he always has." The silence that followed had a particular quality. Coralie recognized it from emergency departments. The pause before someone says something they can't pull back. "The men are starting to wonder," Hennessy said. His voice dropped to something meant to sound like concern. "You're not in the field, you're here every day. They see that. They see. A deliberate pause, the limitations. It makes them uncertain. Let me be the visible piece. You run strategy, I run the front." The silence after that was different, denser. "I'll keep that in mind," Ferrante said, in a tone that meant something other than what the words said. When Hennessy passed through the corridor minutes later, he clocked Coralie at the supply cabinet. He gave her a look she catalogued immediately, assessing, dismissive, lightly amused. The look of someone who had already decided they were about to inherit something and was measuring what they'd do with it. She went back to counting bandages. She doubled the stock of hemostatics. The Ontario Heritage Conservancy Gala was held in a restored railway hall on the east side of the city. 300 people in formal wear, raising money for historic preservation, which was also, Nico had explained neutrally on the drive over, a useful annual venue for conversations that certain parties preferred to have off the record. Coralie wore a dress she had bought herself, dark burgundy, floor-length, long sleeves. Nothing borrowed or theatrical. She'd chosen it because the color didn't show stains, and it had no train to catch on anything. Emergency department logic had applications she hadn't anticipated when she trained. Ferrante in charcoal was a quiet gravitational pull in the room. She stood beside him through 2 hours of the particular kind of conversation that said nothing and meant everything. Introductions, careful appraisals, pleasantries used as measurement tools. He didn't need her to speak. She understood her role. "Stand here, look like you belong, do not flinch." She didn't flinch. 3 years of emergency nursing had taken that particular luxury away. Hennessy hovered at the edge of their circle, insinuating himself into nearby conversations, collecting men's attention. She watched him without appearing to. The man who approached them after dinner service was perhaps 60, silver-haired, with the reddened, careful face of someone who enjoyed expensive things in excessive quantities. Introduced as Darby Strick, she filed the name without reacting to it. Leandro. The handshake was performance. The gaze slid immediately to her. "And your companion?" "Quite a departure from the professional environment you're trained for." He smiled at Coralie with the particular condescension of someone who had already decided she was furniture. Bedside manner in a rather different sense, I imagine. He wanted to see if she'd color. It was a test, she recognized. She'd seen it in families who didn't want to trust a nurse young enough to be their daughter. She looked at him with the exact calm she used when a patient was lying about their medication history. "I've worked in emergency medicine for 3 years, Mr. Strick. I've stood in rooms where things were genuinely going wrong." She tilted her head just slightly. "I'm not standing in one now, though I understand how the settings can appear similar from a certain vantage point." A silence fell over their small circle. Hennessy made a sound he converted quickly into a cough. Strick's face ran through a rapid series of calculations before settling on a smile. "Articulate your companion." "Observant," Ferrante said simply. His one eye had not moved from Strick's face. "I'm told the northern contracts have been moving slowly on your end, Darby. Supply difficulty or a personnel problem?" Strick's smile tightened in a way that told Coralie Ferrante had landed on something exact. The conversation continued another few minutes. Strick departed shortly after. "You didn't need to do that," Ferrante said. Not to her. To the space in front of him, he was watching the room. He was being deliberately unpleasant. He measures people that way. Then he has his measurement. She watched the room with him. The Northern Contracts comment. A pause. Then, with something very close to dry humor underneath it. "Strick has been delaying a resource arrangement we've already settled. His leverage is in the delay. I've been applying counter-pressure through a separate channel. He's now aware I know where the pressure point is." "You did that in the space of a handshake." "Less." She glanced at him sideways. He was still watching the room. The lights went out at 9:20. Not a flicker. A full, instantaneous cut. Chandeliers, wall sconces, emergency overheads failing a half-second later than they should have, which told her the backup system had also been interfered with. Total darkness for approximately 4 seconds before phone screens appeared like scattered sparks across the room. In those 4 seconds, she reached for Ferrante's arm, on instinct. His hand had already found her elbow, steadying, not gripping. "Coralie." His voice at her ear, very low. "Service corridor, south wall, 30 feet, don't run." She didn't run. She walked fast and deliberate, his hand at the small of her back, navigating through the confused press of people. She counted steps. She heard the sharp crack of what she identified as a stun round, and then the entirely different register of live fire, and every part of her that wasn't her training was frightened in a cold, clarifying way, and the part that was her training kept her moving. Nico materialized from somewhere ahead, blood on his collar, something held low in his right hand. "Hennessy's crew," he said, "and Strick's people at the north exit. Coordinated." Ferrante said nothing. He moved. She stayed with him, not because she'd decided to, but because stopping would have been a separate decision that she simply didn't make. The service corridor was fluorescent lit and chaotic. Catering staff pressed flat against walls, someone shouting into a phone. A man appeared at the far end who was not catering staff, his posture wrong, and Nico moved past Coralie in a way she registered more as air displacement than action. 2 more turns. A loading bay. A vehicle she'd never seen, engine already running, bay door already rising. Ferrante helped her in with a hand under her elbow, efficient, no ceremony. And then he was beside her, and the door closed and they were moving through rain-slicked streets, the city doing its ordinary night things outside the tinted glass. Coralie sat for 30 seconds taking inventory of herself. A cut on her palm from something she hadn't registered, a bruised knee, nothing structural. Then she'd turned to Ferrante. "Are you hurt?" "No." "You'd tell me if you were." "I'd need you to know, a beat. Are you?" "I'm fine." She was looking at his left side, the blind side, the angle from which anything coming fast would arrive unseen, an old reflex of hers now. She'd placed herself on his left at some point in the last 20 minutes without deciding to. He noticed she saw him notice. "Hennessy," he said to Nico. It contained everything a question would have asked. "Set the arrangement with Strick 3 weeks back. He's been running a parallel contact with most of the crew. Told them you were." Nico's eyes in the mirror briefly, that the operation needed new leadership. How many stayed? Counting tonight all but his immediate circle. Ferrante was quiet. Coralie had learned over 3 weeks that his silences were not empty. The building in the distillery district looked like a converted loft and functioned as something more organized. Portable monitors, trauma bags, people she hadn't seen before. Someone had been prepared for the night to go this way. The man on the improvised table had a compound shoulder wound. The person managing it had good instincts and limited training. Coralie took over the way she took over in emergency departments. Without announcement, just with competence. The transition of authority that happened when someone simply knew what they were doing. For 40 minutes, she didn't think about anything else. The wound was manageable. She managed it. When she straightened up, hands cleaned, patient stable, she found Ferrante watching her from across the room. "Nico said you didn't try to run," he said, "in the corridor. Running would have been slower." "That's not why." She held his gaze. "No, it's not." The room had people in it. She was aware of them the way she was aware of background monitoring equipment. Present noted, not the thing she was focused on. "Hennessy thinks you can't function at full capacity," she said. "That's what he sold to the crew. That you're," she paused, "compromised." "Yes." "He's been counting the wrong things." She picked up a suture package she didn't need, just to have something in her hands. "He counts the eye, the headaches." "Yes, I know you think I haven't noticed those either. He's made a list of limitations and decided the list is the whole picture." She looked at him directly. "He's never once watched how you actually work. He's never been paying attention to that." Ferrante said nothing for a long moment. "I'm going to end this," he said, "tonight. Not Nico, not the crew. Hennessy has to understand what he miscounted, and it has to be direct." "I know. You should stay here." "I know that too." She set the suture package down. "I'm not going to. He'll tell whatever story he wants about tonight, unless someone who saw it is there to say otherwise. I saw it." Something moved in his face that she didn't have a name for yet. His hand came up briefly and touched her jaw, the edge of it, just his thumb along the line of it. A question that wasn't quite a question. She didn't move. "You are an extraordinarily calm person, Miss Dufresne." Coralie. A pause precise as everything else about him. Coralie. Hennessy had gone to a warehouse in Etobicoke, the kind that certain kinds of planning preferred. Large open floor, catwalks, loading doors. Good for holding ground if your people stayed loyal. He had brought 11 men. Ferrante walked in alone. Coralie was in the vehicle outside with Nico, watching through a feed one of his people had established before they arrived. Ferrante had not asked her to stay in the vehicle. He had said, "I need you to see this, not to be in it. There's a difference." She had understood the difference and honored it. She watched Hennessy see Ferrante cross the empty warehouse floor alone, and she watched the slow spreading grin that opened across Hennessy's face. The grin of someone certain they had already won. "You actually came alone," his voice was carrying, performing for the men on the catwalks. "I expected at least a show of force, for old time's sake." Ferrante stopped 10 feet away, unhurried. "How long have you been planning this?" he said. His voice didn't carry the way Hennessy's did. It was simply audible the way a precise sound in a quiet room is audible. "Long enough to see what's in front of me." Hennessy's voice shifted, still performing, but something more earnest underneath it now, almost like he believed the version of this that lived in his own head. "You're half the operator you were, Leandro. The eye is one thing, but it changes how you read a room. You compensate, and the compensation is a tell. You're slower. You stay back. You think that reads as control. It doesn't. It reads as retreat." "You were watching the wrong things," Ferrante said. "You always have." Hennessy spread his hands, rifles raised on the catwalks above. He glanced up at them, a man gesturing at something he owned. "It's done." Ferrante looked up, not at the rifles, at the faces behind them. Then he looked back at Hennessy. "Put your weapons down," Ferrante said. "Not to Hennessy." The silence stretched longer than Coralie breathed during it. Then, one by one, the rifles angled toward the floor. Men on the catwalk stepped back. Not one of them raised a weapon again. Hennessy went very still. "You watched what I couldn't do," Ferrante said. "You forgot to watch who I was talking to. Every conversation you thought was social. Every call you thought was routine. I spent 4 months doing exactly what you described, staying quiet, staying back. You watched me withdraw and decided it meant I was losing ground. A pause. I was building it. Hennessy looked at the men surrounding him. Not one moved toward him. His hand went for the gun at his hip. You think one eye makes me blind to you, Rafe? The voice was very quiet. The room was quieter around it. Ferrante drew. He had spent 18 months making certain that on his right side he was faster than he had ever been. He fired once. The shot was exact. Hennessy fell backward in the particular boneless way of someone who has had the decision taken out of their hands entirely. He hit the concrete floor, and the expression on his face in his final seconds was not fear. It was something closer to disbelief that the man he had counted as diminished had been, the whole time, more whole than Rafe Hennessy had ever thought to measure. Ferrante holstered his weapon. He did not look at Hennessy a second time. Get the vehicles, he said to the men above. We're finished here. The drive back was quieter than the drive out. Nico drove. Ferrante sat beside her in the back, and neither of them said anything for a long time, and the silence between them had changed. It had weight now, but no pressure, like something that had finally settled into the shape it was always going to take. The city lights thinned, the highway opened up, just dark road and the sound of the engine and rain beginning quietly against the glass. He was wrong about what he was looking at, Coralie said, not looking at Ferrante. Yes, I wasn't. She turned then. The interior of the van was dim, enough to see the one eye and the careful set of his face and whatever was in it that was still deciding what to do with itself. I watched how you worked. From the beginning, that's what I was watching. I don't think you've been diminished. I think you've become more exact. The way things get after they've been tested until what's left is only what was load-bearing. Ferrante looked at her, a long look quiet and complete. Then he reached across and took her hand, not the steadying grip from the gala, not the clinical touch of a man managing a situation, just her hand in his thumb resting against her knuckles. She looked at their hands. She thought about the letter on the bistro table, the crease she'd smoothed flat with her thumb. She thought about the drive up 3 weeks ago, holding herself very still so she wouldn't feel how frightened she was. She thought about the magnesium glycinate, the wrong gauge sutures, the man on the improvised table, the moment in the dark corridor when she'd reached for his arm before she'd decided to. My father's debt, she said. Forgiven, as of tonight. She looked at him, and the arrangement. Open to renegotiation. His voice was low. On your terms this time. She thought about the compound, the maps room, the dinners that had slowly stopped being silent, the way he tilted his head and the way she had learned, without meaning to stand where she filled the gap he couldn't see. I want to go to the supplier myself, she said, alone, once a week. Agreed. A direct line to my father daily, if I want it. Already arranged. She looked at him steadily. You were going to offer those regardless. I was waiting for you to ask. The highway ran dark and straight ahead of them. The greenbelt opened up on either side, flat fields disappearing into rain. Coralie Dufresne held the hand of a man she had not chosen and had not expected, and considered the fact that she had no desire to let go of it, and decided that whether that was a conclusion or a beginning was a question she could afford to leave open for now. The thing itself was there, clear and real, and neither of them performing it for anyone. The compound gates opened as they arrived. Nico stayed in the vehicle with the focused attention of someone looking at nothing in particular. Ferrante stepped out and offered her his hand. Not to manage her, not to direct her anywhere. Just offered. She took it and stepped out beside him, and they walked toward the entrance in the rain, and she thought about what it meant to stand in the space a person couldn't see, and fill it not because you were asked to, but because you simply couldn't bring yourself to leave it empty. The door closed behind them both, and that was enough.